A family of Tuscan peasants. No noble title, no army, no territory. And yet, in less than 3 generations, they would go on to finance popes, kings, wars, and the entire Renaissance. Their weapon? Not a sword, not a castle, a ledger. And one simple, revolutionary idea. Other people's money can make your fortune. The Medici didn't conquer the world with soldiers. They bought it, lent it, and leveraged it, until no one could afford to do without them. Welcome to Strategies and Legends, the channel where history reads like a business plan. Florence, late 14th century. The city is an economic volcano. The guilds control everything. The wool trade, the silk trade, letters of exchange. This is where medieval Europe's money moves fastest. At this point, the Medici are just another family. But they're about to do something very few people dare: treat money itself as a product. This video is a strategic autopsy and an economic one. We're going to look at not just how the Medici built their empire, but who paid for it, how, and at what cost. Chapter 1. The Origins. The Medici came from the Mugello, a rural farming region north of Florence. Wool merchants, craftsmen, nothing remarkable. But Florence was a city where an ambitious man could climb fast if he understood the rules of the game. And the rules were simple: guilds, debt, and political connections. The first Medici who really mattered was Giovanni de' Medici, born around 1360. He started out as a clerk in his cousin's bank in Rome, and that's where he saw something most people missed. The Catholic Church was the single largest financial institution in the medieval world. Tithes, indulgences, fund transfers between dioceses across an entire continent, all of it generating enormous flows of money that needed to be managed. Giovanni brought that insight back to Florence. In 1397, he founded the Banco Medici. Chapter 2. Failures and Risks. Being a banker in the Middle Ages was not a safe profession. The church officially banned lending at interest. That was usury, a mortal sin, and the families who came before the Medici had learned that lesson the hard way. The Bardi and the Peruzzi, 2 of Florence's great banking dynasties, had financed the 100 Years' War on both sides. When Edward III of England decided not to repay his debts in 1345, both banks collapsed. Total ruin. One of the biggest financial crises of the 14th century. Giovanni de' Medici knew this. He studied it, and he drew one lesson his family would hold on to for a century. Never concentrate your risk on a single political client. That was the Medici's first real revelation. Chapter 3. The Strategic Breakthrough. So how do you get around the church's ban on interest? The answer was elegant. The letter of exchange. A Florentine merchant needs to pay a supplier in London. Crossing Europe with a bag of gold is slow, dangerous, and frankly suicidal. So instead, he walks into the Medici's Florence branch, hands over his florins, and gets back a written document, a letter of exchange, that essentially says, the Medici branch in London agrees to pay the bearer the equivalent in sterling, 90 days from now. The merchant travels light. In London, he presents the paper, gets his pounds, his supplier gets paid. So where's the Medici's profit? In the exchange rate. The rate applied in London is slightly unfavorable for the client, and that gap is the bank's margin, not interest, not a sin, just a currency service. And since the Medici set their own rates between branches, they're constantly playing the spread between different cities, what we'd call currency arbitrage today. The bigger the network grows, the more opportunities multiply. It's a model that gets stronger with every new branch they open. That's the moment the Medici understood something fundamental. Finance isn't a cost, it's a product. Chapter 4. The Empire. Cosimo de' Medici inherited the bank in 1429, and he was going to industrialize it. The Medici business model rested on 3 pillars. Pillar 1, the branch network. Florence, Rome, Venice, Milan, Geneva, Bruges, London. Each branch was a distinct partnership. The local manager put in capital. The Medici brought the brand and the methods. A franchise model, centuries before anyone called it that. And crucially, if one branch went under, it didn't take down the whole group. Pillar 2. The interest-bearing deposit. A Venetian merchant parks 1,000 florins at the Medici bank. At the end of the year, he receives a discrezione, a discretionary bonus of 8 to 12%, not contractual, not officially interest, just a goodwill gesture. The church looks the other way. Meanwhile, the Medici take those 1,000 florins and relend them to a prince, a merchant, or a church official through a letter of exchange at 15 to 20%. The gap between what they pay out and what they take in, that's their net margin. In modern terms, it's the exact model of a deposit bank, the interest rate spread. Invented in the 15th century, hidden behind religious language. The genius of it, they're lending money that isn't theirs. Pillar 3. The papal account. The Catholic Church was pulling in revenue from across all of Europe. Tithes, ecclesiastical taxes, fees from newly appointed bishops, money flowing in from London, Bruges, Lyon, Naples, all of it destined for Rome. The problem: how do you move that money safely across a continent torn apart by war, with dozens of different currencies? The answer: a Medici letter of exchange. The Archbishop of Canterbury collects the English tithes. He hands them to the Medici's London branch. The branch issues a letter of exchange. In Rome, the Holy See receives the equivalent in Florence, minus the fees, which stay with the Medici. The bank doesn't move a single coin. It's a pan-European clearinghouse, and on every transaction, it takes its cut. But the real power of this pillar wasn't the volume. It was the signal. Being the Pope's banker was the greatest trust mark in medieval Europe. If the Holy See trusted you, everyone else followed. Chapter 5. The Fall. Cosimo understood something fundamental. Money without political power is fragile. In 1433, the rival Albizzi family had him exiled. A year later, he was back, turned the tables, and had his enemies banished instead. He became the de facto ruler of Florence. Without ever holding an official title, he funded artists, architects, philosophers, not out of generosity. It was a reputation investment. Under Lorenzo de' Medici, known as the Magnificent, the family reached its peak. But that's also where the cracks started to show. Lorenzo was a brilliant political and cultural mind, but a careless manager. The London and Bruges branches piled up bad loans, most notably to Charles the Bold, Duke of Burgundy, whose debts were never repaid. The branches closed. Then, in 1494, everything unraveled fast. Lorenzo's son, Piero II, who history would remember as Piero the Unfortunate, made a fatal mistake. When Charles VIII of France marched his army through Tuscany, Piero panicked, capitulated, and handed over Tuscan fortresses without a fight. For the Florentines, it was a betrayal. He was driven out on November 8, 1494, by a popular uprising. The crowds looted the Medici palace. A Dominican preacher named Savonarola stepped into the power vacuum. But the Medici weren't finished. In 1512, they came back with Spanish backing. Expelled again in 1527, they returned for good in 1530. And this time, they didn't just run a city. They founded the Grand Duchy of Tuscany, the brutal lesson. It wasn't the bank that destroyed the Medici. It was the arrogance of an heir who thought power was permanent. Chapter 6. The 3 Big Lessons. Lesson 1. Study the failures before you play. Giovanni de' Medici didn't invent Florentine banking. He studied why his predecessors had failed, risk concentrated on a single political client, zero diversification, and built his model as the mirror image of their mistakes. Before you enter a market, look at the graveyard of everyone who entered before you. Lesson 2. Money follows legitimacy. The Medici's real asset wasn't gold, it was trust. Being the Pope's banker was the greatest marketing signal of the Middle Ages. When you become the go-to for the most credible client in your market, everyone else comes to you. Whatever industry you're in, ask yourself, who's your papal client? The one whose association with you pulls in everyone else? Lesson 3. Power protects capital, but it doesn't replace discipline. Cosimo understood that money alone is vulnerable. It needs political cover. Lorenzo inherited the power, but let go of the financial discipline. One without the other is a clock with no mechanism. The Medici story isn't just a tale of Florence and Renaissance paintings. It's the story of a family that understood before anyone else that other people's money, managed well, is worth more than your own. They invented financial instruments that still underpin our markets today. They funded Michelangelo, Botticelli, Leonardo da Vinci. They placed 2 queens on the throne of France. All of that from a wool merchant's counter in the Mugello. And where are they today? The direct Medici line died out in the 18th century. The last male heir, Gian Gastone, died without children in 1737, but the name never disappeared. The House of Medici survives through its Ottaviano branch. Prince Giuliano de' Medici di Ottaviano leads the family today, heading an association that brings together no fewer than 10 branches still carrying the Medici name. no political power, no bank. But a name that 600 years after Giovanni de' Medici still echoes through museums, history books, and boardrooms around the world. Not bad for a family of wool merchants from the Mugello. Did you think of the Medici as a family of artists and patrons, or did you already know their real genius was financial? Let us know in the comments. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time for another strategic autopsy.